This video is a sequel to a previous video that came out about a year or so ago titled Jason Kenney, Alberta's First Gay Premier ? That video provided ample evidence of Kenney's homosexuality, although it did not actually out Kenney because it was entirely sourced from readily available publications and postings. Since that time, more evidence of Kenney's sexual orientation have come in, but that point is pretty much moot. Nobody, it seems, is challenging the basic assumption that Kenney is gay, not even Kenney himself. This video is framed as a question because while there's overwhelming evidence that Kenney was a gay homophobe for at least 25 years, recent changes in his rhetoric render it questionable whether or not that term still applies to him. A gay homophobe is a closeted homosexual who is also an outspoken scold of homosexuals generally and or an outspoken adversary of the homosexualist or pro-LGBT rights movement. The term homophobe is problematic. Activists tend to use the suffix phobia a little too liberally to imply that their opponents are crazy, which may not always be the case. Persons who are annoyed when seeing male-to-female transgendered athletes competing in women's sporting events, those people are not necessarily insane if they don't think that's entirely fair. So the term phobia can be overused in some of these situations. From the other side, until relatively recently, homosexuality itself was officially considered a mental disorder. This is no longer the case. However, there are people who militantly challenge the gay rights agenda who still hold that view. Everyone can agree that the homosexual homophobe possesses a horribly twisted mindset. Nobody likes the gay homophobe. America's leading gay zine, The Advocate, recently ran an expose titled 18 Homophobic Leaders Who Turned Out to Be Gay. The article draws heavily from gayhomophobe.com, the website. Together, those two sources provide brief sort of bio blurbs on about 40 mainly American men who were at the same time vociferous opponents of gay rights and were closeted homosexuals. If you're out for an evening of salacious reading, I recommend reading gayhomophobe.com. Today's American gay homophobe is typically a Republican politician or an evangelical preacher famous for giving speeches or holding rallies in opposition to gay marriage or gay adoption or gays in the military, etc. One exemplar, a Republican politician from Florida, mercilessly mocked his Democratic opponent during elections. Another, for being gay. Another Southern preacher was famous for holding boisterous demonstrations against the abomination of sodomy. When such men themselves are exposed as gay, their careers are destroyed, partly because of the milieus that they inhabit are hostile to homosexuality, and partly because of their sheer hypocrisy. Gay homophobes' sexual relationships tend to be predatory, characterized by extreme age and power imbalances. These relationships often involve underage people or prostitutes or the employees or parishioners or students of the gay homophobes. In a surprising number of instances, the gay homophobes are offering counseling to young men to help them overcome homosexual impulses, only to then pressure the same young man into sexual activity. Some instances involve outright rape. Gay homophobes are often outed as an incidence to various police investigations and civil lawsuits, what have you. Another motif, and this definitely relates to Kenney, is that certain gay homophobe politicians were well known to be gay in their local communities. It wasn't until the media revealed their orientation, that they are acknowledged as gay. Jason Kenney will become gay when the Edmonton Journal says he's gay. When did Jason actually become gay? More importantly, when did Jason become a gay homophobe? Well, clearly something happened when he was around the age of 17. He suddenly changes high schools, and then right after that, he makes a decision to relocate to San Francisco, or in his words, to Sodom by the Sea. His homophobic behavior begins immediately at that time. In the late 1980s, at the height of the AIDS crisis, the city of San Francisco passed an ordinance compelling local hospitals to extend visitation privileges to the partners of gay patients. Kenney, then a student at San Francisco U, co-organized a petition demanding a referendum to repeal that ordinance so that gays would not be allowed at bedside as their partners perished. A decade later, in a recorded interview, Kenney bragged about organizing that petition, claiming that it brought him closer to Christ. Kenney now claims that his views were normal for the time. That is not true. Attitudes were indeed a lot harsher towards homosexuality back then, but it was only a microscopic fringe of the population that was actually out there on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, collecting signatures in opposition to gay spousal rights. Political controversies around homosexuality played a central role in Jason's big break into politics. In the 1993 federal election, the Reform Party went from 0 to 52 seats. They swept 22 of 26 seats in Alberta. In the Bible Belt, suburban Calgary and points south of there, Reform won by landslides. Jan Brown became the Reform Member of Parliament, MP, for Calgary Southeast. In 1996, one Reform MP called for an outright ban on gays in the teaching profession. Another Reform MP defended the rights of employers to fire gays, or at a minimum to keep them in non-visible roles in the back of the shop. Jan Brown was the only Reform MP to speak out against those two, and for that reason, she was driven from the fold. This left the Reform Party in a bit of a bind because an election was looming. The battlefield promotion went to a 28-year-old armed only with a high school diploma and with zero electoral experience. With the leader's anointment, Kenney replaced Jan Brown in Calgary Southeast. In the 1997 election, Reform took 24 of 26 seats in Alberta. As an incumbent, Kenney sailed through 6 subsequent elections virtually unchallenged. His constituents would never have supported him had they known he was gay. That case remains today. In the late 1990s, Kenney gave 2 media interviews detailing his alleged personal decision to remain a lifelong virgin. The latter interview was given to the Globe and Mail. This vow of lifelong virginity was apparently taken with other Reform Party men, among them Kenney's longtime colleague Rob Anders. It is unclear if this vow was consecrated by the church, but it was apparently out of devotion to Catholicism that Kenney took this vow. This is rather strange behavior for a Catholic, especially a recent convert like Kenney. There is no requirement in the Catholic Church for persons outside of the convents or outside of the priesthood to remain chaste. In any event, it's all a lie. Kenney is not celibate. Kenney is gay, and that is a lifestyle that is forbidden by both Catholic doctrine and the Holy Bible. The vow is important for another reason. Kenney never kept his sex life private. He granted an interview to Canada's largest newspaper to parade his sexual practices. He became renowned for his virginity. He sought funding for youth groups that promoted abstinence. In 1998, Member of Parliament Kenney voiced bitter opposition to a Supreme Court judgment protecting gays from workplace discrimination. Kenney suggested that the Alberta government opt out from complying with this judgment, which he referred to as a virus. A video from the year 2000 has Kenney holding forth in an after-dinner speech about his personal crusade against gay adoption and gay marriage. Over the next 15 years, Kenney was the most outspoken opponent of same-sex marriages in the House of Commons. He claimed same-sex marriages offered no social benefit. He taunted gays by saying they already had the right to get married, just not to each other. They had the right to marry people of the opposite sex. Kenney voted to restore the traditional one-man, one-woman definition of marriage. Kenney 3 times voted against changes to the criminal code that would have protected gender identity, gender expression, etc. Kenney openly contended that the Charter of Rights equality provisions should not be extended to homosexuals. He likened pro-LGBT judges to people who advocated incest. As Citizenship and Immigration Minister, Kenney censored references to gay rights in the Canada Citizenship Guide. Ministry bureaucrats would draft these passages to be gay rights passages to be included in the guide, and Minister Kenney would draw red lines through those passages. Kenney has later said that the absence of those passages was an accidental oversight. Memos show this not to be true. Another lie. Circa the year 2015-ish, we hit a fork in the road. At the 2016 Federal Conservative Party convention, Kenney spoke in favor of the party dropping the support for the traditional definition of marriage. He never came right out and endorsed same-sex marriages. What he said was that because the Supreme Court had ruled on the topic, it was time to move on. Nevertheless, that was a sharp departure from where he was 10 years earlier on that position, or even several years earlier on that position. This change in rhetoric corresponded with Kenney's growing confidence in the impermeability of his glass closet. Since at least 2010, 2011, at least, Kenney had been haunting Ottawa's gay bars, and he had been attending gay soirees like the fabulous Blue Tent parties, which were organized by his closest acquaintances, all of whom were openly gay. The glass closet is a protocol whereby journalists and otherwise adversarial partisans keep secret the gay inclinations of certain politicians. During those years, and even before, Kenney stayed far, far away from his Calgary home. He's in fact never lived there. He's in fact never lived in Alberta. Kenney's sole recent throwback to his old homophobic past came during a January 2019 speech to the Cochrane Golf Club, where he derisively outed a local NDP candidate as being gay. Chuckles all around. Apart from that outburst, people trawling for evidence of homophobia post-2015 must settle for guilt by association. There's plenty of evidence of that. For instance, a key ally of Kenney's, lawyer John Carpay, president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, launches court actions on behalf of faith-based schools who are opposed to gay-straight alliances and certain forms of sex education, etc. Carpay, a high-profile UCP member, spoke 2 resolutions at the UCP's 2018 convention. When Kenney spoke at the Justice Center's 2017 convention, he compared Carpay to civil rights icon Rosa Parks. At a 2018 conference, Carpay compared gay-straight alliances, or he called gay-straight alliances, ideological sex clubs, and he compared the rainbow flag to the hammer and sickle. Such views are not uncommon amongst UCPers. UCP candidate Joseph Show was praised in writing by a colleague as a man who never wavered in his struggle against GSAs. Kenney has praised Show as a great conservative. While Kenney has been quick to disqualify certain candidates who cross lines regarding Islam, etc. He did not disqualify Sandra Kim, even though she had shared a Facebook post stating, "I do not support homosexuality or homosexual marriage." Kim, that candidate, potential candidate, had been endorsed by the UCP deputy leader. That candidate, Sandra Kim, has also left the party. Kenney's vetting process neglected another constituency contestant who had promoted a video wherein gays were referred to as intrinsically disordered. The UCP voted unanimously against an act to support gay-straight alliances. Delegates to the UCP's 2018 convention voted in favor of a resolution requiring parents to be notified if their children attended GSAs. Kenney vowed to override that resolution, and he generally avoids discussion of GSAs, conversion therapy, sex education, etc. The trouble with the homophobe by association argument is that Kenney also associates with ardent LGBT activists. The webzine LGBT Tory posted several laudatory articles about Kenney. According to LGBT Tory, there are few politicians in the country who have done as much as Kenney has for the LGBTQ community. They point to Kenney's volunteering at an AIDS hospice in San Francisco and to his work as immigration minister on behalf of persecuted LGBT refugees. The latter point is overblown. The Supreme Court, a decade before Kenney became minister, had ruled that LGBT refugees were possible. That was a legitimate grounds for claiming persecution. Kenney's involvement in that particular issue was primarily prompted by his fellow glass closet Tory Foreign Minister John Baird, and their main subtext there was a besmirchment and destabilization of Iran. As well, Kenney's much vaunted AIDS hospice volunteering, about which we don't really have that much evidence, but more importantly, that would have had to have overlapped in time with Kenney's vigorous activism towards preventing gays from visiting AIDS hospices, which opens a window on a rather twisted mind. One claim is true. A flock of LGBTers surround Kenney. In his immediate circle of colleagues and boosters and staff, one can count a dozen openly gay LGBT activist type people. The author of the aforementioned pro-Kenney LGBT Tory articles, Harrison Fleming, is now the UCP's top communications advisor. Kenney very recently forced candidate Eva Kyriakis to resign in pure show trial fashion, complete with not just recorded confessions, but edited recorded confessions. Her crime was a few social media posts regarding sex education and transgenderism, wherein she expressed views that are very widely held in Alberta and are no doubt majoritarian views within the UCP. The Eva controversy, and there's some new stuff coming out now about some of the sermons given by another UCP candidate. They reflect deep divisions within the UCP. The Wild Rose and the Progressive Conservative Party has never truly merged. Issues around homosexuality and transgenderism are not the only points of departure, but they are important and they track along other fault lines between those two communities. The clique that Kenney imported into Alberta to run his campaign, to run the UCP, they are appealing or reaching out to a constituency that is worlds apart from the old Reform Party's populist base. One of these two constituencies is being deceived.